Upset
Well,
roasted.
yeah, it's a real toss-up as to which one's worse. We're about 9 degrees right now.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Wow.
balmy, balmy.
Yeah. Well, good. Thanks for joining us. We've got a great group today.
Yeah, Bruce, you could pick the warmer climate for the winter.
My
Well,
my
normally,
son-in-law, my son-in-law is a basketball coach at SUNY, so we come
Oh,
up and we
wow.
watch the games, and um, I'm gonna tell him he's gonna have to win a conference championship to get me back next year.
Yeah. Good for him.
good
That's great.
challenge.
Have fun.
Yeah. Wow. All right,
Okay,
Mr.
one and
Butler.
all, we have started, and I have started to record the session and welcome all of you. We're doing very well. There are 16 of us online this morning. Glad you
Wow.
could all join
Oh,
us.
good.
We have a nice new year, and we're going to try a few new things. We want to pick up the pace a little bit in this meeting and have it
I'm
move
gonna turn
along
that
a
down
little
and let you
quicker rather
roll.
than lag. And the other thing is, we're going to try to keep it right at about an hour
I
max.
don't have another place to go to.
Oh,
Someone's got
somebody.
another place to go to, okay? So we will do it. And the only thing that that means to you is this will be an appropriate time. If you've got something to share, don't be bashful. Just hop right in and we'll get it and we'll move along and go from one person to the next. So, welcome to the new year. Thank you all for joining, and thank you on Zoom who are on the web page that view this later on. We have 16 on board this morning, and we will get started and see how things go. So, let me view this so it works well for the recording. Who would like to start off? What are you using for your finishing this time around?
Well, I had an interesting experience. That bowl that I brought on Tuesday is made with ipe and maple. And when I was working with the ipe, I realized it was pretty dense. And I looked in my little cabinet and I found that I had teak oil from when I had turned some teak, and it was incredible. Um, when you have a very, very dense wood like ipe or teak or wenge, using teak oil really penetrates. And the directions for it is you really drench the wood, let it soak in, and then hit it 15 minutes later and do it again. And then after 30 minutes, you wipe it off. And then you leave it for 3 days because all that oil that has soaked in needs to cure. And it created what it did is it made the wood more three-dimensional. It brought out the deeper part of the green. So I was really impressed with that. And then deciding what to do after that, because that was just a matte finish, I actually did spray lacquer on it. And I used satin spray lacquer. And then I decided, oh, let me try one more thing. And I have this Yorkshire grit that I bought at the symposium. And Yorkshire grit is a paste that has little micro abrasive in it that the more you abrade, the more they break down and they eventually disappear. And so you use the same pad that you apply it to buff it, and it just continues to break down. And I ended up with a super, let me show you, a super glossy finish. Was not my intention. I don't know if you'll be able to see how glossy that is. Um, yeah. Oh, yeah. So it ended up being incredibly glossy, and with that teak oil, it really brought out the richness of the grain. So that is what I used recently. It seems like every bowl I do something different. That's my most recent one. So there, and that's all I had to say.
Is that the bowl that you cut the bottom out of and then salvaged?
Yes.
Nice job.
Do you want to see the other half?
Oh, that's right, Bruce. You didn't see this. This was amazing.
So this was the top and the bottom from that bowl that I blew up. So this one I inserted 2 segmented rings. This one I inserted a segmented ring on the top and the bottom. So this used to be one bowl. And because of the thinness and the angles, I couldn't reassemble it. So I decided I had to create 2 bowls from it. So
Nice
and then
job.
and this is just whenever I do beading, I just do spray lacquer. Because I've tried other things and it will smear the ink. So spraying lacquer on the basket illusion is the way to go.
So how is teak oil different than walnut oil and some of the other oils?
I don't know. It's just when I did teak once, I didn't like the way it finished because the finish sat on the top. Teak is advertised as being able to penetrate dense woods. That's what it's designed for.
Am I going to be on that screen if I get up?
I can turn the screen.
All right.
Yeah, you can sneak by.
Well, if nobody wants to go, I could.
Yeah, I got
Yes.
a question for Chuck. Is that pure teak oil, or is that mixed with some kind of like dissolvent or something?
No, I took it straight out of the Kende. Well, let me try that
Can
again.
do.
Yeah, the Kende. I took it right out of the can. And
Your can just solid teak oil, or is it a teak oil finish?
it's called teak oil.
Yeah, that's all.
And
It is.
it might be Watco. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's
but
water
it's just-
usually. Yeah.
Is it okay? It's just a little quart can of.
Yeah.
And it's just like any other oil. It seems when it goes on, but it really, most oils you don't let soak on, or you don't drench the way this one advertised you to or instructed you to do.
I was going to ask you if teak oil is actually an oil from the teak plant, and I looked it up on Google. The answer is no.
No.
It says it does not contain any oil or byproduct of the teak tree. Instead, its common ingredients are boiled linseed oil and tung oil. It's marketed as teak oil due to its ability to rejuvenate and maintain its beauty. So I think this would be in a class similar to Danish oil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's actually designed for outdoor furniture. If you have teak furniture, is what it's designed for.
I had bought it for my boat. I had my rail in the back that was teak, and so I put it on that. It worked really good.
Yeah. Wow, it looks like Mark is driving.
I know Danish oil kind of has the same instructions to put it on real heavy,
Oh, really?
Soak in, and then come back and wipe it off, and add more if it's continuing to soak in.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Gary, you are Mr. Finish. We like to call you. So why don't you go ahead?
No, Mr. Finish is Jerry from Sedona. He's the guy that you need to have talking.
Yes.
But my tried and true on most finishes is the wipe on poly, the Minwax. And I put 2, 3, 4 coats on. If I want a satin finish, I put 2, 3 coats of gloss first, and then 1 coat of satin. Because I was reading an article once, and I don't know if it was the AAW magazine or the British magazine, that the gloss allows the wood grain to come through better than the satin.
Yeah.
You don't have the extra particles in it. And so they say always start with gloss and then put the satin on. And I steel wool between each coat, especially if I've got 2 or 3 bowls finishing at once. I'll take them out and I put them on my vacuum chuck. It becomes a great third hand when steel wooling the bowls. And then after it's the final coat, after it's done 3-4 days, a week, or when I get to it, use the Beal system and just do it with Triple E and white diamond, no wax. So, and of course, I sand at least 400 grit, depending on the bowl. But I agree with what Chuck was saying with the lacquer. If you're using different types of dye, you got to be careful with the other finishes. So I'll use the lacquer for the Christmas trees and different things that it's hard to get into to put the finish. So that's about that's what my normal finish is. But I also have used walnut oil. I've used the who puts out the walnut oil? I haven't seen
Mahoney.
Yeah, Mahoney. I did find out I had a Mahoney oil on one piece and it was just dead because it really soaked it up. And I called Craft Supply, and Mahoney also has a wax that he developed to work with the walnut oil. And that makes a big difference using that wax. It'll really brighten up a piece that's dead. So that's about everything.
I have a question for you. Did you say that you used spray lacquer over top of this teak oil? And if so, have you seen any degradation?
Chuck, you're muted.
For a commitment to the traditions of Martin Luther King Jr. and for the decency that has leadership.
Yeah, Chuck, you're muted.
I was surprised when then candidate Carter asked me to join in him.
No, sorry about that. I have a tough time finding my control buttons. No, none whatsoever. But of course, it's only been a week. But yeah, I just figured I'd give it a shot. It seems to. I think the fact that I let it cure for 3 days before I put anything on it, it should be okay.
Has anybody else applied spray lacquer over top of something like Danish oil or walnut oil?
It actually, if you look at the directions on the teak oil, it said you can use poly. So I use lacquer.
Yeah, one other question, Chuck. You said you put some other wax or finish after that to buff it up, to shine it. I wonder if that's similar to Dr. Kurt's. I forget what they call it, but it's got an abrasive in it.
Yeah, it's like Triple E as well.
Okay.
But I think D-Way was selling it at the symposium, so I thought Yorkshire Grit. I had heard of it, so I gave it a shot, and I really, really like it. And you can put it under finishes or over finishes. It's kind of interesting. It doesn't matter where in the process you use it.
I think that's the same with the Craft Supply one.
Yeah.
So I know Spence uses that one, or has used it. I don't know how often, but.
One of the things that
so my question is what would you use on a platter? It's maple. So right now it's just sanded and it's ready for a finish, but I haven't put anything on it because I don't know what I want to use.
Well, my position on that is if it's going to be used and it's not an art piece, it's hard to beat the wipe-on poly because it's a hard surface and it stands up to abuse more so than lacquer or some of the other finishes.
Susan, I put tried and true on mine, and it's got a beautiful shine. It's really soft to the touch. Food safe.
Tried and true.
I swear by tried and true.
If you're going to use wipe-on poly, you probably want to use a combination of lacquer and denatured alcohol to seal it before you put the poly on. A 50-50 mixture. I learned that one from Dean, and that's works out pretty well for me.
Okay.
Yeah, matter of fact, if you go to the Craft Supply website, that's exactly what they say to use. There's a video on sanding sealer, and they use the sanding sealer cut 50% with lacquer thinner, and that's what I use underneath mine.
I've used that formula of wipe on lacquer and the lacquer solvent, and it works well as a sanding sealer. The problem we had was the fumes bothered Kathy, so I had to get away from that as a sanding sealer. If the fumes don't bother you, I think it's a very good sanding sealer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I put in an exhaust fan right behind the lathe for that reason, because that lacquer thinner is
wonderful.
Yeah. Don't keep if you have one of the hoods like I've got, do not keep that on if you're using lacquer thinner, because it just sucks it in, and it actually concentrates it in the under the hood.
So I have a question with the lacquer thinner. You're using lacquer thinner mixed with what as a sealer?
Wipe on lacquer. Wipe on lacquer with lacquer thinner, 50-50 mix.
Yeah.
Lacquer with lacquer thinner.
Yeah, or what Craft Supply uses the regular sanding sealer. I can't think of the name of it right now.
They use DEF, don't they?
No, they use brain cramp.
Mahoney?
They use Mylans.
Mylans, that's it. Yeah, Mylans cut 50% with lacquer thinner.
No, alcohol.
No, lacquer thinner.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
What is lacquer thinner exactly? Do you know what the makeup of it is?
It cuts
just stinks like hell.
Yeah, it stinks.
Okay, so it's not denatured alcohol.
It cuts just about everything.
It's not alcohol. It's a lacquer solvent. I don't know what the base of the lacquer is, but it's similar to the wipe on lacquer, but it's specifically designed to thin the wipe on lacquer.
So is it just regular thinner?
Yeah. Well, it's lacquer thinner. It's not the mineral spirits thinner.
Thinner, okay.
So it's a.
It's not this.
No, it is not paint thinner. That's a mineral spirit.
Okay.
You can find a can just like that, and it says lacquer thinner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this says 100% mineral spirits on it.
Yeah, I have mineral spirits, lacquer thinner, acetone, and alcohol, and I'll keep going through all four of them until I find the one that works. Because if and actually lacquer thinner is great for taking off latex paint that has gone off where it shouldn't be. It's great for cleaning spray equipment that has sprayed latex paint, and removing sticky labels.
Mm-hmm.
So
lacquer thinner is very versatile.
But
I kind of treat lacquer thinner as almost the equivalent of acetone.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong solvent, and I use it sparingly.
Yeah. Use gloves, because it really will raise hell with your skin.
Gary, you mentioned something
gloves,
that I
use something on your hand, a skin lotion afterwards, because it'll dry out your skin quickly.
Yeah, it evaporates pretty darn quickly. And Gary, you mentioned something that I learned the hard way too, that if you have done some CA on your wood and then you go to turn it and you've got your mask on, then you're just putting CA into your eyes. It's just awful.
Yeah, so, CA and lacquer thinner, you don't want to have your hood on.
No. And I would think any of these finishes, our hoods are designed for dust. They're not designed for finishes.
Yeah.
And so when you are doing finishing, Dan Hall, you want to use a vapor mask.
I've never looked into it, but Peak does provide respirators for that kind of use. I don't know if they have filters for our power caps that would be good for vapor or not. I've never looked into that one. It'd be something worthwhile for somebody to look at.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if we have Peak do that presentation, we can question them then.
Yeah. That's a good question for him.
Cool. Who else has got something they want to share? Dan, what are you doing your stuff? You're muted. You're muted, Dan.
Spacebar.
There you
There,
go.
I found it. For the carved stuff, I usually use wipe-on poly until it starts to sit on the top, and then you sand it smooth. I mean, like steel wool, and then the spray finishes, because the wipe-on poly will collect in every nook and cranny, and you end up with big gummy pieces. But the spray will kind of even things out. It's not as good as it is on a smooth wooden bowl, but you can't sand and polish every little nook and cranny. Or I can't. I don't want to.
I used some spray poly on a picture frame right before Christmas, and sprayed it. Looked nice. Put a nice thin coat. I think I probably put 6 or 8 nice thin coats, and then one final kind of wet coat over a period of about 2 days, and it didn't dry. It stayed tacky. And like 3 days later, it was still tacky. And I don't know if it's because I was out here in the shop and it was cold and it wouldn't cure, but I ended up having to take it all off with acetone and then finished it with tried and true.
With the spray poly, if it's too cold, it will take forever to harden. If it's a sunny day, put it out in the sun, and the sun will warm up the wood, and it will cure in usually an hour or less. But if it's a wood that's going to be change color in the sun, I guess you can't do that.
Dave, Kathy and I will often use some finish like that in our shop, which gets cold overnight. So we'll bring the piece into the house overnight. And that seems to help cure it a little bit faster, although it's not consistent. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But temperature is a factor in curing these finishes.
Yeah, I found that out. I didn't have time to wait. I had to deliver the picture like the next day, and I was panicking. I was like, oh no. Here I am with the acetone cleaning it all off. That was not fun.
So poly is used as a final finish on lots of things. Is there anything poly should not be put on that doesn't work well? If you do something underneath, like walnut oil or something on, can you use poly on top of everything?
I'm not sure. I've tried it with the walnut oil, but I haven't had a problem with anything else. But I know about the only thing I use is that, the sanding sealer, either shellac sanding sealer, 1 pound cut, or the lacquer based one.
I would think you could put just about anything over it as long as it's dry, over an oil. If it's dried.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say over an oil, but you want to make sure that you stay away from your waxes, right? Because then if you use a wax, nothing's going to stick.
Right.
Right.
Good point.
Well,
yeah, you want to make sure it's a hardening oil like a Danish oil or the teak oil. You don't want to put it over something like mineral oil.
Mm-hmm.
Trick I've done is when Jamie's not home and I'm working on something I'm using oil for, I'll take and put the piece of wood in our toaster oven and actually warm the wood up. And it helps the oil to be absorbed into the wood. It works well.
Oh,
I'm telling Jamie.
yeah.
I'm sending her the link to the video.
Sure, yeah, I think that's fair.
Change his name
I'll
from
see her
Paul
in
to
an hour.
Rats.
I have my own little oven because when I had the guest house built, I had them run the AC to the bathroom that's in the workshop. And so, but my mom keeps the house so hot that bathroom is like always hot. So I put everything to dry in the bathroom.
Well, my question with the oils was because I know that Mike Mahoney often uses walnut oil on his things, and I hadn't heard of the wax, so that's helpful. But as a stronger finish, the poly works, but I wasn't sure if that would work well if you aged the oil first, but it sounds like it would.
Is anybody else besides me completely overwhelmed with all these different types of oils and finishes and stuff?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's why I just stick with the normally it's either lacquer or the wipe on poly. It's just.
Yeah, I've had good success with wipe on poly. That's why I stay with it as well. But it's just, what if you're going to use an oil, what type of oil to use? Why do you use that oil? How do you apply it? What can you put over it? It's just overwhelming to me.
Does anybody use friction polish?
Yes, I do for some small objects. I usually use a Mylan's friction finish for pins and seam rippers, but I don't use it on any larger objects.
I've used friction polish even on, maybe not a large bowl, but I have for large things, and it has worked pretty good for me in the past when I was chicken to use anything else because I was still learning. I'm still a rookie, as they say, but
Friction polish uses as shellac.
Yeah, friction polish is actually a combination of shellac, denatured alcohol, and carnauba wax.
Yeah, you're just heating it up and making it
not as sturdy as some other finishes. Shellac will water spot, and so one of the reasons I use a poly on a functional object like a bowl or a platter is because it's very durable. It's resistant to water, alcohol. It actually has properties allow it to move a little bit with the wood as it changes temperature. I don't know how it does that, but that little bit of flexibility helps to prevent the crazing that you can get from other finishes like a shellac. So be careful with using the friction finish on an object that you think might be exposed to water or
right.
alcohol.
Right.
Either one of those will deteriorate that finish.
Yeah.
I've used the Mylan's friction polish, but underneath that, Mylan's makes a cellulose sealer that really gives a good base for the Mylan's friction polish. So it's a good team finish.
The only trouble is you have to go out and finance your house to buy that polish and stuff.
Well, yeah, you had to ask Santa to bring it to you.
Sorry.
There you go, Steve.
Nah, sorry.
What would you use to take the wax off the surface of wood? Like when you use the Beal buffing system, the grit is embedded in a wax, and you put it on there, and that wax ends up on your wood. And how would you get rid of that wax?
A lacquer thinner would take it right off.
Okay. Yeah, because I tried just as an experiment buffing something before you put a finish on it, and that wax interferes with anything penetrating.
Alcohol take wax off too, Dan.
Okay.
Why would you? I mean, that Beal's buffing thing, that's a last step, isn't it, in the process? Why would you put a finish on after buffing? buffing it. I don't.
Well, you never know.
Yeah. Well, about you, Dan, that's true.
Well, that little olive bowl I brought in on Tuesday, I buffed it without putting any kind of finish on it because it's kind of an oily wood. But if I did decide to put a finish on it, how would I get the wax off?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't put the carnauba, the last step, on there. That's just the white diamonds, all I used on it.
Do you find that the oil from the woods contaminates your buffing wheels?
I haven't noticed that, but then olive is the only thing I've ever done it on, and it was just an experiment.
Yeah. Well, you can redress your buffing wheels, right, Bruce? Isn't that something that you showed us how to dress your buffing wheels with? Was it coarse sandpaper or something?
Well, the coarse sandpaper, or there's a block of wood to knock it off. But unfortunately, in the oil, sometimes it goes a little deeper in the fibers. It's a little harder to get out, I think. I haven't tried that.
I've used the Beal buffing system on ebony with no finish. And got to be a super hard, dense wood that, like ebony, African blackwood, something like that. Yeah, you can just buff it with no finish.
So there's a way to take your buffing wheels back to basic on, restart them again.
Well, when you start, if it's been a while since you've done any buffing, when you put it in, I've got a little block of wood that I keep in my buffing kit, and I always put the edge of that wood on the wheel to knock off any chips and any buildup that's on the wheel, so that you get as close to starting over again as possible. Then when you apply a little bit of the compound to the wheel.
Somebody said something about sandpaper, so that's I question that.
Yeah, if you use like a 50 grit or 60 grit sandpaper, it's amazing the number of fibers that come flying off that wheel.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I do
Sales instructions actually advise that you precondition the wheels before you use them by doing just that. Take some sandpaper, fairly coarse sandpaper, back it with a block of wood, and hold it up to each of the wheels. And the fibers that come off are surprising, but gets rid of those initial fibers. So what's left should stay there. What is being suggested here is you use that same technique to recondition after you've used them a little while.
Well, I do the same thing as Bruce, but what I use, I've got a wedge of scrap wood, and I put the point of the wedge in, run it across, and it's amazing the powder that comes off of it, especially on the Triple E. Not so much on the white diamond, but the Triple E, it gets rid of all that hard caked on material.
And just so you know, that's no substitute. When you do your buffing, your black shirt's still going to have white fuzz all over it.
Yeah.
So a question that, thinking of Dan's bowl the other day, it was a combination of resin and wood. So does that change what you decide for your finish, to use a combination of things like that?
Yeah, I asked Mark about it, and he uses wipe-on poly for it, so that's what I did. But even when the cedar had its hard parts and soft parts, well, soft and softer parts, and it absorbed a lot, and then you have to wipe it off after a few minutes each time because it just sits on top of the resin, and it will take forever to dry.
I guess when I do the resins, I just put on a really super thin coat. Don't have a problem. And then wait a good 24 hours before recoating. And occasionally I have had problems. I know Ken has had it where the wipe-on poly stays tacky. And I think I've I think I've tracked it down to using the sanding sealer and not sanding off some of the sanding sealer. If I just use sanding sealer, steel woolet, and then try to put on a finish, it might take 2-3 days. But again, somebody brought up the comment about taking it outside. I'll either take it outside or set it in a windowsill on the south side of the house. And that heat really does cure the poly quite quickly.
Gary, the problem I've had with the poly being gummy, as I've discussed with you, I haven't used a sanding sealer on those pieces. It's just straight wipe on poly. And for some reason, the surface got gummy. Even given it time, it didn't cure any better. So I took your suggestion of wiping it down with 4-0 steel wool, and that cleaned it up very nicely.
Yeah.
Very nicely.
I just had to do it with the bowl that I'm working on right now to finish. Had that same problem.
I have a question. The tried and true, I've not used that, but is that a hard enough finish that it could be applied to like beads of courage, or is that going to break down when they try to clean the surface?
Oh, my experience is it hardens the boiled linseed oil and the wax. It hardens.
So which type, because I looked up tried and true, but there's all different kinds. What kind do you use? Is it the original?
I use the original.
Original? So that would be a Danish oil type of finish?
No, it's beeswax and boiled linseed oil mixed.
Oh, original.
Okay. We've got about a little over 15 minutes yet to go. We haven't heard from some people. Anybody else got anything they'd like to contribute on this topic?
I got a quick question. That Steve is on, not Steve Comstock, but another Steve, and I don't see his last name or his face, so I don't know who to count as being here. So Steve, let us know who you are so I can count you. Please.
It's very quiet.
Well, that may be Steve Friedman. He doesn't want us to see his face.
Yeah.
Well, I just texted him and waiting for him to answer. But maybe he went and got coffee.
Yeah.
Or gin.
He's just trying to get credit.
Oh. I didn't know this was for credit.
Yeah.
Everything's
Yeah,
for credit.
we're grading you. Didn't you know that?
Yeah.
If you want to just monitor, that's a different level. But if you want credit.
I think
Looks like Bruce Peak has got something to say.
Yeah, a question. Just to go back on something. Somebody mentioned earlier cellulose sanding sealers. I've used that Deft that has, I think it's called nitrocellulose in it. Does anybody have a comment on whether that has a benefit? It seems to create an initial much smoother finish than just the straight sanding sealer that Deft sells.
Yeah, I just wouldn't use Mylan's friction polish without using that under it, because it just, they sell them together. So I figured they should go together, and I've had great luck with it.
So specifically the nitrocellulose one. I've got that in Mylan's as well.
Well, yeah, I bought Mylan's cellulose sealer is what it was called.
Yeah, because that doesn't seem to go on as well as the Deft in my experience.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's good to know.
The Deft goes on incredibly smoothly, and you can buff it off very easily. And there's some pieces where I've used it as a final finish, and they stay absolutely gorgeous. It's lacquer based.
Are the questions coming, Dan?
I see Dave joined us, but Dave, this is that platter that you helped me on. So I finished it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So it's like 14 inches.
Such a nice job. That was our school challenge to do an OG on the bottom of the bowl. And
OG.
As you can see, I failed OG.
You didn't
Failed it.
fail.
I failed it. Dean came up and he goes, I said, what should I do? He goes, don't turn it anymore. I was like, oh, okay.
Dave, if that happens again, just tell them that that's a modified OG.
Oh, that's a good one. I'll remember that.
Or a personal OG or a Dave Henderson OG or something.
Right. It's a custom OG.
If I can step back to the tried and true discussion, because we have Bruce Peak on, I'm curious to know, the question was, if you use tried and true, is that going to be safe for using for beads of courage objects or boxes? I've got two versions. I've not actually used it, but I've got the original traditional, which is polymerized linseed oil and beeswax. And they have what they call a varnish oil, which again is polymerized linseed oil and natural resin. Do you have any sense of use of these in a hospital environment?
Both of those should be safe because they should totally seal the wood. The issue with things like beeswax is over time, you may have to do some refinishing with an oil or some other compound to seal it again. But again, it's just a matter of sealing the pores so that it can be cleaned and dried, and you don't get bacterial buildup. Think of it as the like a food safe. If it's food safe, it's essentially hospital safe.
Yeah, the tried and true does say it's food safe. And the nice thing about it is it has no heavy metal dryers, no volatile organic compounds, other things like that.
Yeah, in this day and age, pretty much everything is food safe. I would say you'd be hard pressed to come up with a product that is legal that is not food safe.
I like the tried and true because it doesn't feel like it has a finish on it. I brought those little walnut bowls week before last to the breakfast, and a couple of guys said, "Wow, what does this even have a finish on it?" I was like, "Yeah, it's tried and true," and because you can't feel it, it just feels natural to me.
Do you still feel the grain?
Let me see. No. Of course,
Okay,
I sand stuff to 6,000 grit, so
Yeah, right.
it's hard to feel the grain. No,
Every pore is gone.
I don't feel the grain. No.
One word of caution, and I think Spence experienced this. If you use tried and true, you open it up and go, "What the heck is wrong with this stuff?" Because it truly is like honey.
It's honey.
It is honey. It is thick and syrupy, but it works.
Feels good on your hands when you wipe it off.
Yeah.
I put it on barehanded.
Yeah.
I rub it all over barehanded, and then I got the soft. My wife said, "You got the softest."
I think we're getting too much information here.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted.
I like wipe on poly for the beads of courage bowls. It seems to seal everything up, and it will wipe down in the hospital environment. I also use it over acrylic paint, because I paint a lot of designs on stuff, just to seal the paint so that with handling over time, it gives an additional surface on top of the Liquitex paint. For other stuff, I just use Watco Danish oil, a couple coats. And if I want some contrast in color, for the second coat, for the part I want contrast in, I'll mix a little oil paint, like a student's oil painting set, as a tinting medium in with the Danish oil, and put that on, let it dry as you would regular clear Watco Danish oil, but then just just wipe the surface off so that you get any small particulate matter that may not have fully dissolved in the oil off the finish of the thing. And then I just buff it up with a brush, generally with a shoe brush, just, brush it up. And that's what I do.
Who else?
One quick question for Dick. What did you say that you add to the oil to add color to it?
Just regular little artist oil paints. You can get like a set of a dozen oil paints at Walmart for, $12 or so. And just use that, put it in a little plastic cup, like you get individual servings of applesauce or something like that in. Put a little bit of Danish oil in the bottom, and then just stir in a very little bit of the oil paint, and that I use that as a tinting medium, and I have a variety of colors that way.
That's fascinating. That's something I got to try.
So you just got to order oatmeal on Tuesday morning. That way you get the little cups.
Gary, have you ever tried using Merlon?
I'm sorry, was that to me?
Yeah. Yes.
What?
Have you ever used Merlon?
No.
If you spray something or get a finish, a lacquer finish or a poly finish, and you got a super, you mentioned earlier that you use a gloss and then you get a real glossy finish, and then you shoot some satin on top to kind of dull it. If you build up your coats of lacquer and then take some stuff called Merlon, it's like a Brillo pad, kind of. And if you use that instead of going over it with the satin, you can dull lacquer to the point where it looks satin, and it doesn't leave the scratches, I guess you'd say, like steel wool.
Okay, because I've used steel wool to knock off the sheen, but yeah, I didn't. How do you? What was the name of that again?
I think it's a Merca product. I don't know that, but it's Merlon. It's like a woven. I think they call it a scuff pad.
It's like Scotch-Brite.
Pardon?
It's similar to Scotch-Brite, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, it's like 1500 grit or 1500 and 800. It's just the final, scratch up like you would use 4/0 wool, except to me it works better than wool because the steel wool leaves a lot of little, the gray stuff off the wool. Anyway, that was just something you might want to try.
Okay, the Scotch-Brite, the white Scotch-Brite pads do something similar.
They are all the Scotch-Brites that I've looked at are all too coarse.
Too coarse. Well, the white is supposed to be similar to 4/0 steel wool. I think
the Merlon goes even way finer.
It's like 1500.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Use Merlon on guitar finishes when they do finishes on guitars to give them that real shine, that pop.
Okay, Merlon, how's that spelled? M-E-R-L-O-N?
M-I-R-L-O-N, and I don't know where all you can get it, but I know Craft Supplies has it.
Well, hey guys. Amazon says MERLON pad. Dry diamond polishing pads.
It's Merca Merlon. What do you have there, Spence? Got to pull it away just a little.
Yeah, it's Craft Supply carries it. It's called Merlon Total Non-Woven Scuff Pad. It comes in all different kinds of grits. This one particularly is a 360.
Oh, okay.
And it looks like this.
Yeah, the stuff I'm looking at is different. It's for granite and marble stone. Forget that one.
Okay. I
Merlin is with an I, not with an E. M-I-R.
The camera doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And I think I've got like 800 and 1500, something like that. I've got 2 or 3 different, and each grit is a different color.
Yeah, I'm looking at it on Amazon. Yeah, and there's all different types of grits, 2,500, 800.
Those are the 2 that I use.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And
Something to spend money on.
Another unrelated comment, but and Chuck, I'm going to ask you Yorkshire grit that you spoke of. I call all of these things witch's brew because everybody has their own method of making this stuff, including Kirk DeHeer with Dr. Kirk's.
Yeah.
And Mahoney and this just escaped me again. The stuff that Chuck was talking about when we started.
Yorkshire grit.
Yorkshire grit.
Yeah, Triple E.
These are all, I'll call them tried and true turners that have experimented with different stuff to throw on their wood underneath their final finish. And they're, Dr. Kirk's he kind of sells it as a grain filler or a final fine grit stuff to put on just before you do your finish. And basically they're an oil of some type. And I know Mahoney uses walnut oil, and I think Kirk might too. And then they use a wax, and then they use some use beeswax, some use carnauba wax. And then they all use some kind of a real fine grit of something that will, and the Yorkshire grit claim to fame is that theirs breaks down and becomes finer and finer and finer. And I think if you use Dr. Kirk's, you'll find the pumice does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they're all, and there's, I call them witch's brew because a lot of people make their own. They start with some kind of an oil, like a walnut oil or a vegetable oil or who knows what. And then they throw in a little bit of diatomaceous earth, which if you're in the valley where there's lots of swimming pools, that stuff is really, really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And they throw that in, and then they melt a bunch of some kind of wax in it, and they get this witch's brew that they put on their to fill the pores of their wood right before you finish it, or before you put on a final finish. And it works real good. You put it on and then sand it off or sand it in. Works real good at plugging up sandpaper. Yeah. So if you're going to use it, you want to have a nice supply of your fine grit sandpapers.
I've got a whole bag of that diatomaceous earth if anybody needs some or wants some.
Buy the diatomaceous earth in garden supply stores too.
Mm-hmm.
What was that?
You can buy diatomaceous earth, like 10-pound bags of it in garden supply stores, because you can spread that around near the base of your trees or around the base of a pole that holds, say, hummingbird feeder stuff. Somehow this diatomaceous earth is very fine, but it also is very sharp. And so insects like ants will crawl across this. It gets into their joints and tears them up. So it's an insect repellent, physically a repellent. So you can get this stuff really cheap at a garden supply store.
You can put it around the foundation of your house, and it'll keep roaches from coming in.
Yep.
I was going to suggest that if anybody wants to make up a witch's brew, I would suggest that one person buy the diatomaceous earth and share it with everybody. It's cheap, but it's
I've got a bunch.
Not used very much.
I've got a bunch if anybody wants some.
I've got a couple
this,
things.
I got this Dr. Kirk's right here. And
yes,
he calls it just a scratch free. And I use it all the time. I like it, but it, when you're spinning something and putting it on there, it melts and it turns real waxy. So that wax is going into the wood, but I haven't had a problem putting a finish on top of it. I'll even put tried and true on top of it.
They encourage that to put a finish on top of it.
Yeah, it says use before you
here makes a wax. The hair makes a wax that'll go on top of it. But it works with lacquer and it works with oils. So yeah, it's not a finish. It's a surface enhancer, I guess you'd call it, before you put the finish on.
One point about the Dr. Kirk's is I've talked to him directly about that. I don't know the ingredients for the triple E or the other equivalents, but Kirk DeHeer intentionally came up with this compound because it has absolutely no volatile organic compound. He's concerned of all the finishes and all the stuff that he's having to inhale over the years using finishes. So he's seeking products that don't expose the user to things like that. So he's made this scratch-free intentionally to be safer for the user.
Well, and he also utilized that formula because he didn't have to pass any government regulations because there's nothing volatile in there.
Okay.
I have a
want to
question,
thank
just
everybody for having joined.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is there's a preference about water-based poly or regular poly? Any preference?
I have tried the wipe on or the water-based poly, and I had really bad luck with it on bowls. I've used it for like cabinets, flat surfaces, and I've loved it, and I use it for that. But for the wood turning stuff, I could never get it to work. And I've talked with Dean, and he had similar experience. For flatboarding stuff, it works great. He had trouble working with it on bowls also.
I've had similar experience. I used it on some flatboarding stuff years ago. I used the polyacrylic brand and liked it very much, but I have not yet tried it on a wood turning.
Mm-hmm.
I got some water-based poly, and it's giving me, I'm fighting it. It's streaks and everything else.
Yep, that's exactly what I had.
It'll get blotchy on you too. You got to be real. I don't like it. I've tried it as well. Don't use it.
Okay, I get some regular wipe on.
Yeah, I used it with a foam brush on flat surfaces, and as long as I could, just get nice long, continuous strokes, it worked great.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
So we didn't talk about this stuff. This stuff is awesome. General Finishes wood bowl finish. It's oil base. I don't know what they got in it, but man, it sure is nice. It leaves a beautiful, it flows really nice. It leaves a beautiful glossy shine. I use it on cheese slicers. I haven't used it on bowls, but I put it on a little cheese slicer, use a foam brush and put it on, and it's hard and waterproof. Looks good. Good stuff.
Good.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you all for joining. I think this set a record for Chips and Grits attendance. We hit like 19 or 20. So thank you all for joining. And we will see you again next time. And if you've got any suggestions about topics, let me know.